My name is Claire. I'm 34. I was standing in the back corner of a church reception hall in Westfield, New Jersey, holding a glass of water, while my sister told 41 guests that I was the reason our family never trusted easily anymore. She said it with a smile. Nobody laughed, but nobody looked at me either. My nephew was 6 weeks old. I'd flown in from Chicago that morning in a dress I'd bought specifically because it wasn't too much and wasn't too little. I remember the bracelet on my wrist felt cold against my skin, the way it always does right before something happens. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what happened, take a moment to like and subscribe. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read every one. Now, let me take you back to the year before that christening, to the life I had actually built for myself, the one nobody in my family bothered to ask about. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park on the 3rd floor of a building with no elevator because I like the walk. My mornings start at 5:45 a.m. I make coffee in a French press my old roommate left behind, I water the 3 plants on my windowsill, and I put on the thin gold bracelet that belonged to my grandmother before I do anything else. It's not expensive, it doesn't need to be. I've worn it every day for 11 years, since she passed it to me the week before she died and told me, "This isn't jewelry, this is proof you survive things." I work as a senior portfolio manager at a private investment firm called Ashford Grant on the 19th floor of a building on North LaSalle Street. My title took 6 years to earn. I managed $340 million in client assets across 26 accounts, and I know most of those account histories by heart. My desk has one photo on it. My grandmother, taken in 1988, the same year she bought the bracelet I wear. I take the 6:40 train from Lincoln Park to the Loop, I read 2 hours of filings before most of my team arrives, and I eat lunch at my desk 4 days out of 5. Nobody at Ashford Grant knows about my divorce, because nobody there has ever asked me to explain myself twice. I don't say this to complain. I say it because it matters for what comes next. I grew up in Westfield, the older of 2 daughters. My mother, Diane, raised us with a very specific rule: appearances first, feelings later, if ever. My sister Rachel is 2 years younger than me, and from the time she was 9, she understood something I didn't, that in our house, being liked mattered more than being right. I married young, at 24, to a man named Peter, who worked in commercial real estate and who my mother adored before she'd known him 3 months. The marriage lasted 6 years. It ended the way most quiet failures end, not with a scene, but with 2 people signing papers in a lawyer's office in Oak Park, splitting $61,000 in shared savings and going back to being strangers. My mother's response to the divorce was one sentence, delivered over the phone. "Well, I hope you know what people will say." She wasn't wrong. What people said was that I'd failed at the one thing a woman my age was supposed to get right. Rachel, meanwhile, had married David at 26 in a wedding my parents paid $38,000 for, and by the time she called to tell me she was pregnant, I already understood my role in the family had been decided without a vote. I was the cautionary tale. She was the proof the system worked. I remember one dinner, maybe 8 months after my divorce, when Rachel said, in front of our mother, "I just don't want what happened to you to happen to me." She wasn't asking a question, she was making an announcement. Our mother nodded like Rachel had said something wise. The christening was in April. Rachel and David's son Theo was 6 weeks old, and the reception was held at St. Bartholomew's Parish Hall, the same one Rachel got married in. 41 guests, white folding chairs, a 3-tier cake from a bakery on Elm Street that Rachel had mentioned unprompted cost $410. I was standing near the drink table when Rachel clinked a spoon at her glass and asked everyone to gather for a toast. She thanked our parents. She thanked David's parents. She thanked everyone who showed up for Theo, even the ones who almost made it. Then she looked at me, directly at me, across the room, 41 people turning to follow her eyes, and she said, "This is my sister, Claire, the divorced one. Don't mind her, she's still figuring things out." Someone laughed, a short, uncomfortable laugh that died fast. My mother, standing 2 feet from Rachel, added she couldn't even keep a husband and now she wants us to believe she's fine. The room went quiet in that particular way rooms go quiet, when everyone is waiting to see if you'll make it worse by reacting. I didn't say anything. I was wearing a navy dress, simple, no jewelry except the bracelet. Outside it had started raining and I could hear it against the tall windows of the hall. I remember the sound more clearly than I remember most of what was said that day. I touched the bracelet once with 2 fingers, the way I do when I need a second to decide something. Then I set my water glass down on the table, and I said, "Excuse me," and I walked outside into the rain and I stood under the awning for 11 minutes without my coat. Nobody came to check on me. So I worked. I want to be specific about this, because vague success stories mean nothing. In the 2 years after my divorce, I left my job at a mid-sized wealth management firm and took a position at Ashford Grant, starting as an associate analyst at $71,000 a year. I worked Saturdays. I got my CFA designation in 14 months, faster than the average candidate. By year 3, I was managing a book of $80 million. By year 5, that number was $340 million, and I'd been promoted twice. The person who believed in me before the numbers did was a man named Robert Whitmore. He wasn't my boss at Ashford Grant. He ran a different firm entirely, Whitmore Capital, a private equity group based in Chicago that Ashford Grant partnered with on 2 major deals. I met him in my 2nd year, in a due diligence meeting where I was the only analyst who'd actually read the full 400-page filing. He didn't say much to me that day. 3 weeks later, he asked Ashford Grant if I could be assigned as his primary contact on future deals. I've worked closely with him ever since. He is not warm. He does not offer compliments easily. But once, after a deal closed at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, he told me, "You don't perform for a room. That's rare. Don't lose it." I didn't tell my family any of this, not because I was hiding it, but because nobody had asked a follow-up question about my work in 5 years. My present life is quiet. I don't post about it. I still take the stairs to my apartment. I still wear the bracelet. The invitation to Theo's first birthday party arrived by email, 11 months after the christening. Rachel had switched venues. The party was being held at a private event space in downtown Chicago, of all places, because David's company was sponsoring part of it as a client appreciation event. I almost didn't go. I sat with the invitation open on my laptop for 2 days. Then I called my mentor, Robert, about an unrelated matter and mentioned it in passing, that my nephew's birthday party happened to be hosted by his company's event partner. There was a pause on the line. Then he said, "David works for me. Small world. I'll be there." He said it plainly, the way he says everything. I could have said no. That's exactly why I went. I wore a plain black dress and low heels. No statement jewelry, just the bracelet on my left wrist where it always sits. I put my hair back simply. I wasn't dressing for anyone in that room. I was dressing the way I dress every day I go to work, because that's who I've become, and I wasn't interested in performing anything different for people who hadn't earned the effort. The venue was on the 32nd floor of a building on Wacker Drive. Floor-to-ceiling windows facing the river, white orchids on every table, a string quartet near the entrance. David's company had clearly spent real money. I arrived 14 minutes early and stood near the windows before anyone noticed me. I watched the room fill. Men in tailored suits, a few women in dresses that cost more than my monthly rent, waitstaff circulating with trays of champagne. I took a glass of water instead. I spotted Rachel across the room in a red dress, laughing loudly at something a man in a navy suit had said. She hadn't seen me yet. A woman near the bar asked if I was related to the Whittemore family. She'd assumed, based on where I was standing, that I was someone important. I said, I work with them, and left it at that. A caterer offered me a tray of seared scallops. I took one, thanked her, and kept scanning the room the way I scan a filing before a meeting. Start at the edges, work towards the center. David's mother spotted me first. She crossed the room with the kind of warmth that arrives 10 seconds too fast to be real, kissed my cheek, and said, "Claire, we didn't know you'd make it, given everything." I didn't ask her to clarify what everything meant. I smiled and said I was glad to be there. A few minutes later, Rachel noticed me. She didn't come over right away. Instead, I watched her lean towards our mother and say something behind her hand, and I watched our mother glance in my direction and shake her head slightly, the way she does when she's already decided how a story will be told before it happens. At 7:40 p.m., David stood at the front of the room with a microphone, thanking guests for coming to celebrate Theo's first year. He thanked his company, he thanked his parents. Then Rachel took the microphone from him, smiling at the crowd, and said, "I also want to thank everyone who's here supporting our family, even people who don't always show up for us the way we need." She looked directly at me. 60 guests turned to follow her gaze. "My sister Claire's had a hard couple of years," she continued. "It means a lot that she found the time." A few people chuckled, unsure if it was a joke. It wasn't. The room went quiet. I said nothing. I touched the bracelet on my wrist, once, with 2 fingers. That's when Robert Whitmore stood up. He was seated at a table near the front, and he rose slowly, the way people do when they're not in a hurry to make a point, but intend to make it completely. The room turned toward him. He was, after all, the reason half the guests had free champagne that night. "Why didn't say something?" he said, calm, measured, the way he speaks in board meetings. "I want to correct something. Claire doesn't work for David's company. She's a senior portfolio manager at Ashford Grant, and she personally manages $340 million of assets on behalf of my firm and others. She holds a CFA. She closed a deal for us 11 months ago that saved my investors $2.1 million in structuring costs. I don't say this to embarrass anyone. I say it because I don't like hearing facts get rewritten in a room I'm standing in." Rachel's face didn't move for a second. Then her jaw tightened, and the smile she'd been holding all evening flickered and dropped completely. David's champagne glass swayed slightly in his hand. Somewhere behind me, I heard my mother say quietly, "I didn't know that." I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I said, "Thank you, Robert." Then I looked at Rachel. "I'm not the divorced failure you introduced at Theo's christening. I'm someone who's been building a life you never once asked about. That's the only correction I need to make tonight." I picked up my bag. I turned to Robert and said, "I'll see you Monday," in the same tone I'd use in any office hallway. Then I walked toward the elevator. Nobody stopped me. Nobody spoke. I could hear my own heels against the marble floor, the string quartet still playing softly near the entrance, completely unaware that anything had happened at all. I pressed the elevator button and waited. In the reflection of the brushed steel doors, I could see Rachel still standing near the microphone, frozen, her red dress catching the light, her hand still hovering near the spot where the microphone had been. The doors opened. I stepped in. They closed. I found out what happened after I left because Robert told me the following Monday, over coffee before our 9 a.m. meeting. Rachel tried to recover the room by announcing dessert early. It didn't work. Several guests left within 20 minutes. David's company reassigned the client appreciation partnership to another team the following quarter, and two of David's colleagues later told Robert, off the record, that the optics of the evening had raised some internal questions about David's judgment. My mother stopped speaking to Rachel for 3 weeks, not out of loyalty to me, but because she hated finding out something second in a room full of people that she should have known first. Robert told me all of this in the same flat tone he uses to summarize quarterly earnings. No embellishment, no pause for effect. I felt nothing when I heard it. Not satisfaction, not guilt. I just had a 9 a.m. meeting to get to and a filing due by noon. I called my mother that night anyway, from my apartment, sitting on the edge of my bed with the bracelet still on my wrist. She said, "I heard about the party." I said, "I figured you would." There was a long pause. Then she said, "Your grandmother would have liked that you didn't yell." That was all. My mother has never been a woman of many words when it actually counts. I hung up the phone and sat there for a while, and for the first time in almost 2 years, I cried. Quietly, for maybe 4 minutes, alone, with the lights off, my thumb resting on the bracelet the entire time. Then I got up, washed my face, and went to bed, because I had work in the morning. Rachel texted me 3 days later. It read, "That wasn't fair of Robert to say in front of everyone, 'Hope we can move past this.' No apology, not one word about the christening or the party or 11 months of silence in between. I read it twice. I didn't respond." 2 months after that, I heard through my mother that David had been quietly moved off Robert's primary account list. Nobody framed it as punishment. It didn't need to be. Today, I still manage the same portfolio, a little larger now. I started mentoring 2 junior analysts at Ashford Grant this year. Both women, both told me they'd never had someone actually explain the reasoning behind a decision instead of just handing them the outcome. I still live in the same apartment. I still take the stairs. I still wear the bracelet every single morning before I do anything else. Nobody gets to decide who you are in a room you didn't choose to perform in. People will tell your story wrong, sometimes on purpose, sometimes in front of everyone you know. And the only real answer is to keep building the version of yourself that doesn't need their permission to exist. I didn't win anything that night. I just stopped explaining myself to people who'd already decided not to listen. If this story reminded you of your own worth, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.